Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. So as we were talking about in the last half hour, you've got the Senate right now going one way down in Austin as far as this possible sales tax increase. The House scheduled to vote on it today. And it doesn't seem like anybody's happy. It just there's confusion. There are people scratching their heads. There are people trying to run away from the issue completely. And then there are some also who are for this, including the big three, who are for increasing the sales tax. And joining us right now, a good friend from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, senior economist and director of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, Vance Ginn, joining us. Vance, did I wrap that up nicely where it just seems like everybody's going in different directions as far as their thought process on this possible sales tax increase?
Well, good morning, Chad. It's a pleasure to be with you. You're right. And every day, maybe even every hour, there seems like there's something new that's coming up, and there's a lot of different directions it's going. But, one thing that's been interesting, Chad, just recently, is they're actually talking about spending restraint. We've actually heard that a little bit more. We've been talking about at the foundation all session. We need spending restraint. But then finally they're talking about it. Now it's just a matter of what sort of property tax relief are we going to see in the process.
Yeah, but they're not talking about that much restraint, are they?
Well,
I mean, it's
at least they're mentioning it.
Okay, all right. Because honestly, I've had listeners commenting on this, the last 2 days, and somebody weighed in earlier, and they said, "Is there anyone talking about cutting spending?" And it's not really cutting spending that they're talking about. I think the Senate yesterday said, "Okay, we won't spend an extra." A couple $1 million? I mean, they're kind of reining in what they were going to spend. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just real quick on that, there's a $9 billion bill that was introduced for public education and property tax relief, with $2.7 billion of that going to property tax relief. And so they were talking about doing this penny tax swap, and adding about $6.5 billion more. So instead of doing that, they put some other monies that are in the state's treasury and reallocated them for $3 billion to more property tax relief. So it's a reduction of about $3 billion at the end of the day from what they were looking at here recently.
Okay, let's start off with where we were, I guess, on Friday, and where we're going today in the House. Let's talk about this swap idea of increasing the sales tax and lowering the property tax rate. I believe you guys at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, you may be one of the only organizations right now that I've seen publicly on Twitter, other than the big three, who have said, no, this can work, this can be a good idea. Tell us how it can work and how it can be a good idea.
At the foundation, we've long been in favor of getting rid of property taxes, eliminating them, moving to a consumption-based tax, which a sales tax is more efficient. It allows for people to make decisions and then determine when they want to spend and then pay taxes in the process, instead of being forced to pay a property tax that's subjectively determined or kicking people out of their homes. A sales tax doesn't do that. And so I think from an economic standpoint, it's more efficient. It's also more fair. I know that a lot of people don't agree with that, but I would argue it is more fair to have a sales tax system in place. And so what we've been in favor of here is to say, look, this would be a move in that direction. Have a penny increase in the sales tax from 6.25% to 7.25%. Then you add in the local, and so it can go up to 9.25%. And then that would be about a 15 to 20 cent cut in property taxes across the state. And so you're seeing the change between these two. One's going up, one's going down. Maybe many people will see no net change from their overall tax burden, okay? But I think we're moving to a more efficient, effective form of taxation overall. And look, what we've said, too, at the foundation, though, is that there's not spending restraint, meaning if we don't pass a conservative Texas budget, then we are not for this penny swap. It's got to be spending restraint, and this is kind of the icing on the cake, if you will, to bring about more property tax relief, which so many people are concerned about across the state.
Okay, so have we seen, as of today, have we seen that ideal scenario come about where we have that spending restraint, where we have the sales tax, if let's just say we had that sales tax increase, lower property tax rate, have we seen that scenario play out to where you guys think this can work, this would be a good idea?
No, we haven't. I mean,
Okay.
There's still, even if you look at the Senate's budget, I mean, the House budget is up by 14%, okay, from what was appropriated last session. Population growth and inflation was up 8%, so the House budget's over by $12.4 billion from the average taxpayer's ability to pay. So I really see no forward hope with the House budget of looking at a conservative Texas budget. But the Senate's budget is over by just $5 billion. I say just because it's so much less than the House, but it's still $5 billion over. So they've allocated $2.7 billion to property tax relief within the budget. So let's say we remove that, right, from the $5 billion. That leaves $2.3 billion. Well, that's the portion right there that unless we can move that portion, the $2.3 billion, to property tax relief to give a total of $5 billion to property tax relief, we don't see there's a path to conservative Texas budget. And so what I'm hearing, though, across down the street here, I'm 2 blocks south of the Capitol, is that there is some move for spending restraint, and they're in the budget conference committee right now. And so there is a way for them to put $2.3 billion to property tax relief, and then do the sales tax swap on top of that. That should only be, in our view, that's the only way for this to really work.
Okay, so as we know it right now, and I think you briefly mentioned this when you were speaking there, would most Texans see their tax burden? Let's say we move the tax rate or the sales tax up, to buy down property taxes. Would the average taxpayer in Texas see their tax burden drop?
No, not just from the penny swap.
Okay.
No, I mean I think it's a net a marginal change at best for what the average person would see in their tax burden. But when you talk to people, when you look at some of the polls, some people are willing to pay a little bit more in sales tax to see their property tax go down. I know that's not everyone, Chad, but there are a lot of people who are willing to do something like that. And when you think about the economic dynamics, I mean, just real quick on the economics is that, Adam Smith back in 1776, Wealth of Nations, said you don't want to tax capital because capital formation and accumulation bring about the wealth of nations. So I would love to see the day where the Texas model can even be stronger, bring about an economic juggernaut by not taxing capital, which is property, and that way you allow for more economic growth and prosperity in the process.
Listen, long ago, and when Neil Bortz was on this radio station before he retired, and I was a fan of the idea of the fair tax and going to a fair tax model. It sounds like to me that's ultimately what, maybe not the fair tax, by name,
sure,
but that's what you guys would like to see. Is no property tax at all. Go to the consumption based model. If we were to do that, Vance, if Texas were to move to that model, which I at this point I don't ever see them doing it, but let's say they were, that would be a major shift, obviously, in sales tax. What would that sales tax rate have to be in order to cover what we are bringing in for property taxes?
Yes. So I think what you would need to be is around 10% state and local. Okay, but the way you do that is by broadening the sales tax base. Currently, we exclude $42 billion worth of revenue from a number of areas, one of those being like unprocessed food, some of those being a lot of services. There are over $3 billion worth of services that are currently exempted. And so if you broaden the base, and that's part of sound tax policy, going back to Art Laffer and a number of other key economists, it talks about a broader base, and that way you can get a lower rate. And I think by doing that, we also bring about a more efficient tax system. I mean, any tax that you have burdens the economy because it's a redistribution of resources out of the productive private sector. The question is which one is going to reduce that burden or provide the least burden in the process? And the economic literature is pretty clear on that. It's the sales tax.
Visiting with Vance Ginn, Senior Economist Director over at Texas Public Policy Foundation. Let me ask you something. I guess to look at this from how the average voter is looking at this session, when they hear property tax relief, what do you think the average person, what are they expecting? Because I think Republicans need to do a much better job right now of managing expectations. Because when we're talking about saving $175 or $200 or even $275 on property taxes, I don't know if the average person goes, oh, that's great, thank you. They may appreciate that, that one, that cut, but does the average person look at that as real relief in Texas?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Is that people want to see lower property taxes. That's what relief means to them. There's a lot of good reforms. Like I think Senate Bill 2 with the reforms that are in place with that would slow the growth. That's a key part to making sure that if we do cut property taxes, that they don't grow at a fast rate and wash out any of the savings that we do find for homeowners. And look, if you look at what's in there right now, the $2.7 billion in the House and Senate budgets for property tax relief, most people won't see any relief at all. They'll pay less than they otherwise would, but I don't think that's going to be good enough for them. And I think that's where they've come in and said, look, we've got to put more money to property tax relief. Maybe this penny sales tax swap idea would allow that to happen because we're talking about another 20-cent compression on property tax relief, meaning cut. I say compression, that's a technical term, but cut in the property tax rate. But and then there's a concern, though, about raising the sales tax. So they put themselves, they being the legislature, put themselves in a tough position because they've wanted to spend too much money. Let's increase teacher pay. Let's increase the basic allotment. A lot of money is being spent on education. I mean, a massive amount of money. And instead of putting towards property tax relief, which seems to be the number one issue on most people's minds across the state, that's really where more of this money needs to go, is the property tax relief.
Yeah. So that's what it really comes down to, is the money that's being spent.
Yep. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. And spending is the ultimate burden of government. Right, Chad? I mean, and so when we think about how much money is being spent, it's a massive amount. We have a $200 and almost $50 billion budget over a 2-year budget cycle. And whenever I'm thinking about, that's a lot of money that's coming out of the productive private sector. So how can we keep more money in the private sector? And I'm hopeful that, look, we're running out of time, though. We've only got a few weeks left. 27th is sine die, the last day of session. Let's make sure that we can get some spending restraint, and that way we can actually provide property tax relief for Texans.
Vance, before I let you go, I don't know if you like to make predictions or not, but I'm going to go ahead and have you make a prediction if you want to. The House today will apparently they may move on this sales tax increase, lower property tax rate. If they do that, it'll go to conference. What do you ultimately think will happen? What do you think we'll see? Do you think we'll see a sales tax increase and lower property tax rate, or do you think it'll look more like what the Senate did yesterday?
I think that there's a big push in the House to do this today, and I think we'll have a good discussion once we get closer to session whenever you think about the conference committees and what will happen. I'm hopeful that we can get as much money to property tax relief as possible, but I would be remiss if I don't just say one more time, spending restraint is the key.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Vance, tell folks one more time where they can get information on what you guys are doing and how they can follow along with the remaining 20 days that we have in the session and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you. So we're at texaspolicy.com is our website, and our Twitter handle is at TPPF. You can also follow me at Vance Ginn on Twitter as well.
All right. Vance, as always, appreciate your time. I'm sure we will visit at least once or twice before this session is over.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That's Vance Ginn with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO.